I give the CIA a total credit for sponsoring and initiating the entire consciousness movement, counterculture events of the 1960s.
All right. Welcome back to another episode of Rise to Liberty. Today, we actually have a very, very special show for all of you. And I know I say that every single time, but that's because it's true. Every show is special. But we do have a wonderful guest today, Anonymous Italian. Not a, just Anonymous Italian. So, with that being said, I think we should kind of just jump into it. So, with that, how are you doing today, Anonymous Italian?
Good. Thank you. I really appreciate you having me. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. It's, my pleasure. I'm glad that you felt comfortable enough to choose me. So, anything I can do to make you feel more comfortable, make this go easy, and, hopefully have a fun conversation, even though, things might get a little heavy at points. So, with that, though, I guess, who are you? What can you say about that? Because in case, we have some blind viewers or listeners, as other people call them, you are choosing to stay anonymous. And I think with good reason. So who are you? What can you tell us about that?
Well, first off, I appreciate you wanting to make this a comfortable experience. It's a really hard topic. Also, I think some people who have experienced it, we get used to it, and the general public who may be listening justifiably would be a little bit more uncomfortable. So you mentioned the word fun. Yeah, I mean, it's for people who have had some acclimation to this type of subject, or they've had some personal experience with it. It's also good to have a little bit of what's the best word, like to just try to have some kind of humor about it at some points. But it is a very, very serious topic.
Right.
So it's being a host, it must be challenging sometimes to straddle that line. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. I mean, humor is definitely a way that all of us deal with the tough things in life, because
Sure.
I mean, what's the alternative? To cry about it, and nobody wants to do that. So might as well try and crack a smile while you can. So,
And you can, yeah. So I'm with you. So who am I? Um, I will give away information about who I am only in the sense of the context of the subject. And I'd rather just say that
right.
to give people respect who are listening, because it's an interesting topic when it comes to like cognitive infiltration, or what people call mind control
Right.
programs. It's a lot to expect people to believe. There is a lot of good, solid, broad information out there about it. But for some of us who have been through what others call programs, the sad reality is that you may not have as many receipts for it as you would like, or as maybe people interested in this subject might like. And that might be on a continuum. Maybe for some people who have been through this, they do have a very good trail.
Right.
I'd rather be honest with people and say my trail is spotty. It's fragmented. It comes from stories that have been handed down between people that I know or a family member, and I've cross-referenced it with information that I found over time, things that happen in my geographical area. And so I try to put it all I try to put it all together to the best of my abilities and make my presentation. And I'm pretty sure that was a pretty long caveat, but again, I just rather say that for the sake of the truth.
No, I actually believe that's a perfect way to kind of bring out this topic. So, just I'll take the chance right now. Here's your warning. If there's a possibility that certain heavy topics might trigger you, might not be pleasant to listen to or whatever, viewer discretion is advised right now. So beyond this point, you're an adult. You make your decisions, but things could get heavy. So there's your warning. Now, with that out of the way, I guess exactly what so I would classify you as a survivor. Is that something that's fair to say?
Yeah, within this realm, I am, and I I'm a little bit um, I want to make sure that I start at the right place.
Right.
Um, so I guess, are you asking me like, who am I? Do you want me to start at a certain point,
Um,
or?
so I guess we'll just jump straight into it. Exactly what did you experience to make you a survivor? Like why are we first of all having this conversation? Why do you feel that it's important to discuss what you went through?
Okay. Um, I was born into a family, and it took me a long time to understand what this story was all about. Um, I experienced a lot of abuse as a kid. And by the time that I got older, I started to remember that I had been sexually abused. And I said, well, I could go try to get therapy about it. And I took that very, very seriously. And as time went on, I learned how to cope with it. And I started to remember things that had happened to me that were pretty common to stories of people who were sexually abused. And I'm like, okay, this is what happened to me. I've been very depressed and very anxious and have a little bit of a rough time getting through life. And I took it really seriously, had a good therapist, developed really good tools. But then I started to just keep crashing.
Right.
And by the grace of God, or whatever you want to call it, I started to research some of the things that were online um, back in like the mid to late 2000s. And I started to learn about things like, as I always reference, the Franklin cover up.
Right.
And you heard about McMartin.
Oh, of
And
course.
yeah. And I started to think about daycare center abuse, and again, the McMartin preschool scandal, the Franklin cover up, as I'd mentioned. And I started to study the details of those stories. And then, of course, the SRA part of it popped up. And I'm sitting here thinking while I'm researching, I'm like, did this happen to me?
Right.
Because prior, I remember the individuals that abused me. And I'm like, okay, these were people that were in my life every day. And you hear so many stories about relatives, neighbors, friends that sexually abuse children.
Babysitters. Yeah.
Yeah, all that kind of stuff.
It's always the people closest.
Yeah, and there's a lot of truth to that. And then if I sound a little bit hesitant, I just want to make sure that I'm presenting something that the audience can follow easily. So
Right.
so if you need to get me more focused, just let me know. So how should I put it? It was like I started to wonder, is it logical for me to attach some of these broader stories to my own experience? Was
Right.
there a wider cause for all this abuse that I experienced day after day? Because I was sexually abused by a neighbor that was about 6 years older than me. And then I was abused by a family member that was a cousin. And that's as much as I knew at that point.
Right.
And then again, I started to look into what people call more conspiratorial stuff that was really hard for people to believe, and it was very scandalous. And I was
Still
like,
is.
yeah, yeah. It's like, what's changed? And
Right.
and then I said, it just kept eating at me, and I'm like, no, this just seems too familiar. And that's basically where I started. So basically, I made a connection with my own personal memories and my own personal story to some of these more bigger stories of a more organized faction of people who did this.
Right. So
And that's,
just for
sorry, go ahead.
clarification, because one of the big criticisms that I hear from the pro satanic panic people are typically, like, oh, this person just went and saw, a movie, and then all of a sudden, after seeing that, they believe that they have these memories. That was not the case with you, correct? That it was something that slowly came on. And even when it was introduced to your life, you didn't say, yep, that's exactly what happened. And went from there, you slowly discovered it and researched it yourself, correct?
I couldn't have put it better myself. The biggest skeptic in my life was me.
Right.
And it did come on slowly. And I started to really try to flesh out the information, and it's it was like every day I would say, did this happen to me? Wait, let me go back and check. Let me do a little research here and a little research there. And it would just keep coming up. So nobody had to force me to be skeptical. I don't
Right.
need the help of the False Memory Foundation to help me be skeptical.
I'm pretty sure all they do is just, gaslight and literally drive people crazy, because false memory doesn't exist, in case anyone's curious. It
Yeah.
doesn't exist. So
Yeah. So that's the thing right there is, there's plenty of skepticism in the person who was abused to satisfy that
right.
urge, if you want to call it that.
Right.
The other thing that I had in my favor was a relative who was starting to have memories and thoughts that he could not really pinpoint, and he was wondering why he was having the thoughts that he was having. He was able to grasp personal stories that we could both exchange that were like witness testimonies that we could confirm each other on a certain level. And maybe you can help me with this, because when I go to the organized part, I might have difficulty finding words to hook those things together. So I'm just calling it the more organized levels of abuse that were being perpetuated. So my answer to those questions or accusations, whatever you want to call it, about some person watched a movie and they thought, wow, I was abused by a bunch of people in a room wearing robes.
Right.
I don't really have an answer for them.
Right. Well, it kind of seems like those people have already made up their mind before even actually thinking about it. I mean, I guess if somebody does go through the motion of actually looking at things, listening to stories such as yours, looking at what evidence does exist, and evidence is kind of a interesting word, right? Because one man's evidence is, another man's scandal or made up nonsense. So it's kind of interesting that that's the threshold, but it just seems like they've just already made up their minds about what is and is not possible or true.
Right. And if I spend my whole life chasing the goalposts that they're moving, there's a whole bunch of reasons why that would not be good for me.
Right.
If there's a distinction here between somebody who has lived through this stuff and some guy who's a scholar who's trying to do a college paper on it or a university paper. So again,
Right.
Going back to respect for the audience, they are not hearing from a scholar. They're hearing from somebody who is a personal survivor of it. So
Right.
I decided a long time ago that I can't do a bunch of backflips and devote my whole life to proving something to somebody else's standards who is always going to keep raising those standards because they just don't want it to be true.
Right.
Now,
Well, and it just seems like an impossible bar to be able to reach in the first place, because I'm not exactly sure what these people expect as far as what they call evidence.
Right.
There's not going to be, a picture of it happening with, everyone's full face being seen, and like
Right.
the level of quote unquote evidence that most skeptics say has to be met, otherwise it doesn't exist, which is also a weird, stance to take. It's like, well, I cannot prove it, so that means it doesn't exist. It's like, no. If you can't prove it, then you also can't prove that it doesn't exist, right? Like it's not
true.
It's not so black and white like that, which is why I say it seems as though they've made up their mind
Right.
and have just made, an impossible hurdle to overcome, which is only damaging to people who actually have experienced abuse, because then nobody's listening, they get gaslit, and then they just feel more alone than ever.
I think that's definitely part of it. And I will add this caveat too, and these things don't have to exist divided between each other. If you're somebody like you who's doing a podcast, or again, going back to a scholarly paper, due diligence has to take precedence.
Right.
And I'm all for that. I'm all for somebody like you coming up with a case, coming up with their evidence, and presenting it to the opposition or somebody opposed to you. But I think, in all fairness, if you have lived through this stuff, I would only suggest come up with enough information to get you centered and get a foundation, and then work on getting yourself restored, healed, whatever word you want to call it, if you have been through this stuff, because you don't owe anybody else that.
Right.
Absolutely. So again, I don't want to belabor it, but that's the stance that I'm taking, and I am out in public, and I think it's just good for me to say that. I don't have the evidence like a police department or a scholar researcher or a journalist.
Well, for some of my reoccurring viewers and listeners, people know that I've been covering the West Memphis 3 case lately, and there was something that was pointed out to me. Well, not like pointed out to me, but I recognized it going through old videos and everything. One of the prosecutors actually mentioned that, for instance, DNA evidence is not primary evidence. That's secondary.
Yeah.
However, firsthand confessions is primary evidence. At
Wow.
least that's the standard in a courtroom.
I didn't know that.
Well, and this is why we see pushback a lot from the false memory syndrome foundation people, because they say, oh, memory's not reliable. We can't trust what this person remembers or not remembers. And it's just such a cynical position to be in, because it's just like everyone's lying all the time and nobody can remember shit. And it's like, that's not how the brain works. It's like, granted, if you take three people, form them in a triangle, and then a car accident happens in front of those three people, they're all going to remember details that the other doesn't. Granted, yes, that's true. But that doesn't mean that just because they don't remember a particular detail, that the car accident didn't happen.
Exactly. And that seems to be one of the keys for it. And again, you make that distinction of somebody who's an observer or a researcher, they have to work with that data. But for the person who lived through it, they got to take a little bit of a different approach. And so that's what I learned. Because I don't want to jump ahead too much, but if you lived through this stuff and you were a victim of a more comprehensive cognitive infiltration, mind control, trauma-based mind control, part of the program is that you're not supposed to remember.
Right.
That's
the goal of the programmers.
You're not supposed to remember. You're supposed to live through your whole life believing that this never happened to you, and the events that you were a part of, and what you did and what you didn't do, and who was in control of you, who was running you, isn't supposed to even be part of your memory.
Right.
That's called OPSEC, operational security.
Right. So
going back to the beginning, because I hope I don't want to bore your audience with all this background and qualifying.
No. I think you're doing great.
Okay, cool. I come from a family that, through whatever means, I think I might have some answers, maybe not. I'll make it really simple. I come from a family that where my father ended up working in organized crime, and he married my mother, and her uncle, my uncle, her brother, ended up getting into the intelligence services. And by the time I was born, rolling into the early 70s, there was a lot of things that were going on where, as we all know, there was the so-called MK Ultra experiments and mind control programs. And I believe that the organizations that were doing this type of stuff were going into the networks that they already had, meaning the intelligence services, organized crime, where they would go into the people's families who were part of this and just extract them and use them for these experiments.
Right. Well, and it kind of seems like by the time the Rockefeller Commission, came around, which, I mean, that was a complete nothing burger, right? That was just, that was a, the whole world's a stage kind of a thing. And my personal opinion is that, they got exposed. They didn't want to, but it did happen. And because that happened, they had to push it underground.
Sure.
So it ended, but they just, changed the name around of the program, moved some money around in some shady ways, and continued doing the exact same thing, just in the underground.
Right. So, yeah. And I think there's truth to that, but coming from my point of view, and this isn't to say that you're wrong about what you just said, these underground, underworld, esoteric networks were always around.
Right.
So I think one of the things that doesn't get talked about in this history is that these groups were picking from people and families that were already involved
Right.
in that network. On the surface, I think sometimes people get this, and I don't blame them, this very cartoonish thing of, oh, whoever allowed their children to be part of these programs must have been evil, or they were just picked off the street and taken away. And
Right.
there's probably some truth to that. But I think what, as I said, what doesn't get exposed is a lot of people that are already in these networks working for the intelligence services or organized crime, their children were used for it. And that's what happened to me. You could have sat down with my father and said, he's a pretty cool guy. He's a pretty upstanding guy. He
Right.
wasn't a very high level organized crime operator. He was just part of the network. My uncle, was the same thing. I'm not making excuses for anything that they did wrong in their lives, but it was all pretty basic. And
Yeah.
just because of the jobs that they had during the Cold War, anything was fair game.
Right.
And so there could be a lot of reasons why I was picked for the more strategic reasons that I don't know anything about. But what has been talked about and what has been discovered is when these networks were doing what they were doing, they looked for children who had an ability to dissociate.
Right.
And it's a certain aptitude in certain people. And if you do the research, every human being in the world has the capacity to dissociate.
Right.
It's a survival skill. It's a defense mechanism. So I think Dave McGowan did a really good job in the beginning of Program to Kill, where he said, if you're driving on a 3-hour car ride and you turn the radio on, and I'm like, why did this 3-hour car ride only seem like 30 minutes? You just
Right.
associated.
Yeah, I had somebody one time basically compare it to like highway hypnosis when you're
Yeah.
just driving and zone out. It's more like a more intense version of that, but essentially that. And yeah, everyone has the ability to do so.
Right.
Like you said, it is a defense mechanism for the brain, because the brain and our nervous system will try to protect itself at all costs.
Especially,
And
sorry.
oh no, you're fine. When we're backed into a corner like that and can't
Right.
escape whatever is happening, then it will do whatever it takes to save itself.
Right.
So,
And so, once you're handed something difficult, you have to start compartmentalizing
right.
just to get through it. That to me is a God-given gift.
Agreed.
And yeah, so I think there has been a lot of research done into a lot of the origins of this type of exploration in the Western world. A lot of the hypnotists, a lot of the scientists. I think Gregory Bateson might have been talking about this a lot. Was that him? And then the hypnotists like Milton Erickson. They started to realize this is something they could literally farm.
Right.
And what happened in my particular circumstance was very common to a lot of people who have went through these programs. The family gets compromised in some form or fashion, whether it's through their criminal activities or some kind of emotional blackmail. And this organization is able to have access to their child, who's about 3 to 4 or 5 years old, and they see if they can how well or if they can dissociate. So through experiments that were done in England and maybe in America, I forgot the name, but this is the simplest one for the audience probably, is a scientist told families in this controlled experiment where the newborn was in their crib, and they would say, if the baby cries, go over there and comfort the baby, and that's natural, and the baby stops crying. And he goes, now try this. When he starts to cry or she starts to cry, turn your back on the baby and wait. And of course, it was very hard for the parents to do.
Right. The what's known as the cry it out method now.
Yeah. And
which is like standard practice, being taught by, child development practitioners.
Wow. So what they discovered was some of the babies would keep crying and crying and crying and crying. Some of them at some point would stop crying and start looking around.
Right.
Guess what they just did?
Disassociated.
That's it. So obviously I was one of those kids.
Right. So to kind of fast forward in your story a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So at one point you started having, slow bits of realization that like this might have been something that I went through, I being you.
Yeah.
What was that journey like from, oh crap, this is something I might have been through, to all but confirming this is what happened to me?
Well, going back to what you said about fast forwarding, and going back to the point I made earlier about how I had been through therapy, I knew I was sexually abused, and then things really weren't getting better as much work as I was putting into getting better. And I started to do the research, and slowly over time, it started to sink in that I was able to make connections as like, what's the word? Like there was a protocol. Like I thought about something again, like the Franklin cover up, and then I do newspaper research where I grew up, and I would be like, this is the same protocol. It's not the Franklin scandal, but it has all the same ingredients.
Right.
And I started to have memories, and I didn't trust the memories. And I'm like, why am I having these memories? And I talked to a family member, and he'd be like, I got the same memory also. And we started to remember how the kid that sexually abused me, and as stupid as it sounds, like when you're a survivor of this, the kid who abused me that was 6 years older, his father was in law enforcement.
Interesting.
Yeah, his father was in law enforcement, and he knew the people in the local government, and a lot of the people that we grew up with in the local government all had kids that were sexually abusing other kids.
Right.
Now, where I grew up was very densely populated, but the area, the town itself, was only 5 square miles long.
Right. And you said this was like early on in the 70s, which
70 through the 80s, yes.
So that definitely would have been, we do not discuss our family problems out in public or at all, because
Right.
that would bring shame to the family, or, we don't want the neighbors knowing our business sort of mentality. So
Yeah.
it was a lot easier to hide a lot of these things.
Yeah, it was easier to hide it in that sense. But if you take it further, if you have a 5 square mile long town where the nerve center of the government is corrupt at that level, it's
Right.
not just about bringing public shame. It's about keeping secrets for a lot of reasons. So
Right.
everybody's complicit. And
Yeah, everyone's guilty.
everyone's guilty. And a lot of them are complicit in not saying anything because
Right.
there's a payoff.
Right.
And that's the kind of situation I was in as a child. And when you have so much power over this little area and you are basically in charge of the local government, you can do anything you want. It's game on. So you had the law
Right.
enforcement agency, certain elements of the law enforcement agency, the local government, and businessmen all tied in together with this complicity, which is something Jim Rothstein is amazing at talking about. If anybody wants to research this type of subject, Jim Rothstein is great. Even if he's wrong about a few things, he gives you the good outline.
Right.
So here's another curveball. Where I grew up was a very, very small but very highly advanced military base. And that's where my uncle worked at. And they did a lot with satellite technology. They did a lot with microwave technology and
electromagnetic technology, I'm sure.
Yeah, aviation medicine. And if you go into the
Right.
documents, aviation medicine was a really broad field. It did everything from actual medication for pilots to mind control. It all fell
Right.
into the heading.
Well, as far as I understand it, the U.S. Air Force and the U.S. Navy were two institutions that actually never had to address any of the mind control experiments or
That's what I heard, yeah.
the human experimentation, which is clearly illegal and unethical. They never had to address any of it in front of Congress or to a journalist or anything. They just slept or creeped by and never said anything.
No. And so this is the kind of a constellation that I grew up in. And so now it makes sense to me after, my memory starting to come back through a lot of emotional pain, which I don't complain about. It's because that's mine.
Right.
Because I wasn't supposed to remember. And, again, I with all respect to your audience, I know it's a lot to believe. But that's the thing. That's the way it is.
Right.
And so that's where we're at.
So I find all of this interesting because I've talked to quite a few survivors, and out of every single one that I've ever talked to, I think there's maybe been one person that I had doubts about. But that could just be me. I don't understand why somebody would make up a story like this. I mean, to say that there would be nobody in the world that would ever do that is also, a dumb statement to make. Of course, there's some really odd people out there that will say anything to get attention.
Yeah, sure.
But I don't believe there's a whole lot of people out there pretending about this. And the thing is that the truth never stays buried. It eventually comes out always because it's the truth. You can't destroy the truth. It still exists. And eventually people get tired of covering it up. So the truth always comes out. And then this is something that I've noticed about the skeptics. So if you take all of the core elements that make up trauma-based mind control or ritual abuse, satanic rituals, any of this stuff, nobody argues that Satanists exist. Nobody argues that animal sacrifice happens. Nobody argues that child abuse doesn't happen. But when you put them all together, then all of a sudden you're a crazy person.
Right. As soon as you see the constellation, everybody says you're full of shit. And that's why.
Right. And that doesn't make sense to me.
No. And that's why I use the word constellation, because if you really think about this stuff, that's what it's like.
Oh,
you see this pattern.
Descriptor.
Yeah. So I'm really glad you said that, because that made it much easier to riff off of. It's
Right.
that's what literally happened to me. It's like over time, through a level of coming to terms with emotions, and finding some good therapists, and having a faith, and just doing the work, you start to see the constellation. So if you are a survivor of this, it's a scary thing to do, because you weren't supposed to remember. That was the
Right.
directive. So
Right.
going back, go ahead.
Oh, I was just, agreeing with you. So,
Yeah. So going back to the origins of my story, I realized over time that I was born into this family who had these connections. They may have not have wanted me to be involved in this, but I was. So you had this town where I was sent to the classic daycare center that was in an Episcopal church. I was not raised Episcopal. Right next to a military base, right next to the law enforcement agency that had this corruption.
right.
So there's your constellation.
Right. Yeah. All the puzzle pieces are there.
Right. Right. So I think we've laid a pretty good groundwork for evidence, or do we want to keep doing that or move forward?
No. I mean, the thing I have realized is that the people that don't want to believe, they're never going to believe.
Mhm.
That they're going to talk about it as if it's a old wives' tale or a campfire story that they want to dabble in, but they're ultimately never going to actually believe it.
Right.
And it's like, you know what? Even and this is what's frustrating to me about the skeptics, is that just mathematically, there has to be some people out there that suffered through this.
Yeah.
And so when you approach everyone as somebody just making it up, somebody seeking attention, that's absurd to me. In the opposite direction, saying that, everyone that ever experienced one type of abuse, like one type of abuse is the same as all other types. No,
Right.
that's a crazy statement to make. And then to say that all these things exist independently, but they couldn't exist together and nobody's ever experienced that, is also equally but opposite crazy.
Right.
That's it's absurd to me, and it hurts my brain, because I'm such like a logical thinker and reasonable person. I try to look from those perspectives, and I don't understand how they can hold that. I don't understand how they can square that circle.
Right. Yeah, I'm really glad you said that, because I'm sure the same respect would go to a researcher or a journalist. But again, if you live through this stuff, eventually you cannot play by their rules.
Right.
You have to look at the truth as much as you can, and how did that affect you?
Well,
That's it.
and I think the skeptics kind of have to actually realize, because this is true. I mean, this is like the largest scandal known to human history.
Yeah.
Anything bigger is some written down records that we lost in the Library of Alexandria or something. It's
Right.
we don't have record of anything bigger. So
Yeah.
why would there be this evidence that you require when there's no statute of limitation on some of these crimes? And then why would you need evidence of the crimes if you continually commit them? It doesn't quite make sense. And it's an impossible standard. Now, obviously, that doesn't mean you just throw skepticism out the door, but
No. But
you
I'm
yourself,
sorry to interrupt you, but it goes back to what you were talking about on your last show, about how the Church of Satan was always trying to make everything so reasonable all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So let me ask a reasonable question, not to you, but just in
Right.
general. If there was a person, or somebody was a person who was planning and executing these operations or rituals or processes, why would you want to get caught?
Right. Right. And not just caught, but caught in the largest scandal known to man.
I mean,
Right.
everybody talks about being reasonable all the time. Well, let's be reasonable. And let's ask that question. Why would you want to get caught? And what are you
Right.
going to do when you did get caught? What would you have to do if you were going to be accountable, and you would have to let go of that plausible deniability?
Right.
There's reason.
Right.
You know what I
Right.
mean?
I think part of it, I mean, I'm not exactly sure how you feel. But from my perspective, coming to terms with the fact that one, evil people like this exist, it's real. um, and that, even if it's not happening next door to you and your family right this very second, doesn't mean that it's not happening somewhere.
Right.
I think that's a hard pill to swallow for a lot of people, that, genuine evil exists.
Yeah.
And genuine evil seems to kind of come in the form of being mundane.
Sure.
It seems like it will sneak in any way it can. It doesn't, evil as a force doesn't kick the door down and announce that it's here every time. So it's sneaky.
Yeah,
It's attractive to some people.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it all, this level of, nefarious behavior relies a lot on deception,
Right.
And it has to,
Right.
because if it gets exposed, it creates a level of controlled outrage where people just want to do something about it.
Right.
Nobody likes this. Let's bring it down to its most, there's the word everybody loves again, the most reasonable, simplest common denominator. Why is it to this day in prisons that are filled with people who have committed crimes, hurting a child is like the worst thing you can do?
Right. Even some of the worst people can't stand those people.
That's what I'm saying. I don't know all
Right.
the reasoning and the politics behind it, but even then, in a prison, in a supermax prison,
Right.
if you did that, you're in trouble. That's how distasteful, and that's not even a strong enough word,
Right.
it is for people to deal with children being hurt. So, you don't even need the cognitive infiltration, trauma-based mind control thing for people to be outraged.
Right. Yeah. It seems to be naturally bred into us, I guess, is humanity.
Mhm.
Which is actually one of the reasons, I do believe in a certain amount of morality being instilled in us just for the very act of existing. Granted, I think as a child, you have to be taught some, but I think, universally, there's an understanding about a few things, just because you exist, that's right and that's wrong. It, at least it seems that way to me.
Yeah,
Um,
I would agree 100%.
so one question I have is, so after you've gone through this journey and on this journey, you're realizing more and more that this is the reality.
Mhm.
How
Yes.
exactly did you handle that? How did you, how are you still sitting here and not, gone off the deep end?
The biggest thing is being in relationship with people that can either make an effort to understand it, or they have some level of deeper understanding. So, for instance, through God's grace, the counselors that I found, they were well studied in dissociation, how the brain works, some
Right.
level of neuroscience, and the ability to just sit with people and help them work their emotions out. And that sounds very simple, but it's hard to do. But that's the kind of work that is needed for anybody who has been through abuse. But the caveat is for example, these counselors had some level of understanding of how the mind works, how dissociation works, and how compartmentalizations happen, and how somebody was hypnotically induced through trauma. They have a issue in their mind where these grooves, I think they talk about it in neuroscience, where they call it a cul-de-sac. And in that cul-de-sac, I'm probably not explaining it really well. In that cul-de-sac, they just keep looping the same thought over and over again. And they found this out with veterans and PTSD and all that kind of stuff. So that's what was happening to somebody like me. Again, through God's grace, and I say that emphatically, I found these people and they helped give me building blocks to help me understand, and help me understand that it was okay to understand what was happening. And, by people showing some level of respect and love for somebody else.
Right.
Combined with the data, combined with how the human works, how we are so wired to be in relationship with other people. Because if you think about it, if you are especially you're on the level of a mind control survivor, it's basically existential isolation.
Right.
You were given these directives as a small child to never talk about it, that your family would die if you talked about it, you would die if you were talked about it, and they threatened you with some kind of moral, some kind of being damned morally. So you're completely alone.
Right.
So
Which is a very common
remember.
tactic from abusers.
Yes. Yeah. It's the same protocol, just used for different outcomes.
Right. Right. It's a bit more organized and intentional.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I started really, I hope this is helping. That's what I started to, thank God I was able to start grasping onto. But when I was going through it, and it has taken a couple years of severe emotions, feelings like I just could not believe what was going on with me. It was like a level of incredulousness that was paralyzing.
Right.
That this can't be real. So you stop trusting your mind, and it creates a lot of anxiety. And I was always a pretty active, social, busy guy. And when I was going through this, I went through a whole year of agoraphobia.
Right.
Which sucks for anybody, but for me, that was completely alien. Thank God I had one of my dogs at the time. I'm like, I got to get my dog out.
Right.
So I would get the poor dog out, and I'll be like, okay, I can go grocery shopping now. Oh, I can do this now. And just slowly but surely, because it's an emotionally painful experience to come to terms that you were tortured, that your mind was taken away from you. You were forced to think in a certain way, and you partook of things that you didn't want to partake of, and you had no way in your mind to go to a parent, to go to somebody who loves you, and nobody to protect you.
Right.
So you have to compartmentalize, and that gets you through until it doesn't. So if you're blessed enough to even survive it physically, you're going to still have to do some work.
Right. It's not the end of it.
No.
Now, earlier in the conversation, you mentioned like this being generational. Was it generational in your family? Like, have you been able to trace it back in your genealogy?
Yeah, I believe so, and that's where I do have evidence. Um, for example, starting with my uncle, his pedigree, and again, I ask the audience forgiveness because I really don't want to use his name,
Right. And
and
that's not important anyways. So
yeah, and I don't want to give too many details to pinpoint him. He's since passed on, but pre-World War II, he was going out to Montauk. And I know
interesting.
that's like a big can of worms, but um,
Right.
he was in Montauk as a 16, 17-year-old kid, part of these groundbreaking technological experiments that nobody even heard. It's common now, but it was unheard of at the time.
I mean, hell, they made it into a hit TV show on Netflix.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I don't know if something happened to him, but I believe he was sponsored by elements that were interested in this mind control stuff.
Right.
So my opinion is they set him up, they let him use his skills, and they gave him a station in life, and that was the trade-off.
Right.
We give you this station in life where you can go anywhere in the world under an assumed name. He was out in Cuba in 1959. We have a picture of him, in Cuba just before everything cooked off
Right.
with the revolution, with cameras all over him in this beautiful suit. And they're like, well, now it's our turn. We get to do what we want to your family.
Right.
And that's what happened.
A deal with the devil.
Yeah, basically the Faustian bargain, as they say.
Right.
And so another interesting thing that I don't have proof for is that if you ever look at some of the stuff that happened with who was the hypnotist, George Estabrooks.
Right.
Guys like him were going into the WPA programs that Roosevelt came up with, the workers programs, and they were basically farming people for these hypnosis experiments to see if they had the aptitude or the conditions to be used as experiments. So my family was part of the WPA, and my mother was a secretary, and she got a job through the WPA, which is funny because her brother was a spook.
Right.
And I think my uncle was running his own little spy ring. And if looking back on my mother's behavior, she fits a lot of the indicators that she was at least hypnotized, because she would check out constantly. Not a bad lady, great lady, very moral person. But when something bad would happen to me, it was like she would check out and just start following directives.
Yeah.
Which I can go into, I can go into so many details about that, but I understand you don't want to make this a 4-hour podcast,
Maybe someday. I think that would actually be pretty interesting, honestly. For today's conversation, probably not, because I think you do have it right. Like, this is a lot for people to take in.
Sure.
Right. And it's also a lot for you to talk about. So I definitely think at some point it would make sense. If it's something you want to do, I would love to do that at some point. So you have been able to pinpoint these things in other family members. You had another family member be able to independently corroborate similar memories.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, what do you do with that? When you sit there and finally realize, oh shit, this is real. What I guess, what was it like when you finally just had that ultimate realization?
I think that was something, as they say, it would come over time. Your your body will only accept so much.
Right.
And so what I kept doing was just I kept learning how to, as I don't like this word, but like to just accept it on like a holistic level, as opposed to like everything just being research and data.
Right.
And so I did the thing where I built a family. You know, I built a network of people. I talked to other people who have been through this. I try to deal with the emotions that have just been compartmentalized in me for a very long time, which to me is some of the hardest stuff, because the emotions are really severe, and until you start to understand what happened to you, that was the part that made me feel the most insane. Was like, why am I having these emotions coming out of nowhere, where
Right.
I'm just falling into like this horrible grief or this anger or this rage? And it took me a while to process and to put into context why I was having these severe emotions. And that doing that work, that was the what do I do?
Right.
You know, that was the part that helped me really, really start to get a foundation and get some ground underneath my feet. You know, that's what made me start to feel better and more composed and more, you know, just a lot more clarity about the situation, and learning that I just wasn't alone anymore. I did not have to live in that existential isolation that just completely dehumanizes people.
Right.
So I have a family, I have people, you know, having conversations with you, I mean, has helped. But even
Right.
before that, there's people in my life. Some of them may not understand it too well, and some of them really get it. They're my family.
Right.
So you have to see, we can't do shit without other people.
I wholeheartedly agree. People always need people.
Right. So that is completely antithetical to what these programs were about, because you're not supposed to know about them. If
Right.
you have a group of people who know about this stuff and they're acknowledging and uplifting the person who went through it, well, now the community knows that wasn't the goal for these people. I'm not
Right.
sympathizing with them. I'm just looking at it from their point of view. Going back to what I said before, why the hell would you want anybody to know about it? That's the ultimate goal.
Well, and it's a certain attitude towards elitism. Um, you know, I'm part of the club and you're not. You know, this is why fraternities and sororities are such a big thing. Um, I'm a part of this thing that's greater than myself, and your average person is not. Some people
Right.
really get off on that idea. And don't get me wrong, I understand the concept and why it's attractive. It doesn't work for me personally. Um, but I can see exactly how that would get out of hand very quickly, especially to somebody that maybe doesn't have the same boundaries as, you know, the rest of civilization. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that happened to my uncle. And I think it's good to be really, really careful. And maybe I have this luxury.
Right.
You know, I know my uncle wasn't this generic uh he wasn't this generic sociopath narcissist, like all the words they use now.
Right.
He gave himself over to something that was going to give him a higher station in life and make himself feel more important.
Right.
And he was, in his little way. And he paid the price for it.
Right. And some of that is
Mhm.
definitely pushed on us socially,
Yeah.
from this country. And don't get me wrong, I love this country. America's the greatest country on earth.
Hey, I'm
But
very happy here. Yeah, absolutely.
um, but at the same time, there are some negative aspects of our culture, and that is one of them. Is that, you know, you're never done climbing the ladder. You know, this
Right.
whole metaphorical rat race, and you know, you have to reach a certain rung of the ladder to be considered accomplished or whatever. I think that's kind of like why we have an issue with college or just universities in general. Not everyone needs to go to college. Also, the more college degrees you have out there, the less they're worth. I mean,
Right.
but yet everyone gets told, leave high school, go directly to college, or otherwise you can't get a good job. And that's just not true.
Right.
So now we have this huge mess to clean up. So I think it kind of works the same way, right?
Yeah.
We're kind of pushed into some of this stuff socially, and maybe in some unconventional ways as well, because, as a man, you want to provide for your family, and some people really think all about that. So they think that they're doing the right thing, and maybe they don't realize it until it's too late.
And that's a good point. And that's what, again, I wouldn't expect your audience to understand, but that's what, from a personal view, going back to the anecdotal thing, that's what happened to my uncle, which is very common for many people in the intelligence world. He
Right.
had his pedigree. He was part of things that took ingenuity and genius. And, all of a sudden he agreed to too much. And then it went out of control. And here is a man who had a very impressive resume. He had foreign names that he lived under, had a lot of money in the bank, and he died in existential isolation. He was a millionaire
Right.
when he passed away. He was part of the Montauk program. He was part of all these tech programs for the satellite industry. And he kept secrets his whole life. And then just before he died, he didn't have a wife or a family. He isolated himself from everybody. And he slipped out a little bit of his personal story in his obituary that he made himself. And going back to tracking down information, that's when I found it. I went after his obituary, and this little 2-paragraph obituary opened up a bunch of doors for me.
Right.
And he ended his life as a spook who sat by the door. But the problem is nobody opened the door. And that's
Right.
really sad. I know he did some bad things, but that's really sad. The human cost of this is what really
Right.
scares people, and I don't blame them. We can talk about data and what program and sub project and that's all cool, but at the end of the day, what does it do to people?
Right. Exactly. Because that is exactly what we're talking about. Is when we talk about these programs, this was done to children and adults alike.
Sure.
And honestly, that's actually one of the reasons why I started covering the topics that I do. That's one of the reasons I, so naively thought at one point that the political route would be, I'd be able to get at least something done. No, you can't. But the whole point to the work that I try to do is I want to expose these bastards and the way that they were able to do these things so that it's far more difficult for them to do this in the future. I want people to be aware of the capabilities so that they actually are not only aware of it, but then they'll start seeing things instead of just being oblivious to it, worrying about who won, the last sports ball match, or, when Starbucks is dropping a new bear-shaped mug. Like,
right.
I saw that video on Twitter, and it about made me sick. There were like people fighting over it. And it's just like, I get it, but holy hell.
Yeah.
So I think conversations like this are incredibly important.
Thank you.
Because this is what's going to prevent it.
Yeah.
And granted, you and I are just one individual each, but we can still do a lot of good with that. Now, if we have a lot of these conversations going at the same time, that's when the world really changes.
Yeah.
And it's the private conversations that are actually going to get this done more. So
I agree.
So my hope is that by doing what I do with this show, building a platform to where you would feel comfortable coming on and sharing your experience is honestly just like the greatest compliment I could ever receive, because you find value in it.
Yes.
So there's something going on here. And honestly, all I want is to do it for the kids, the ones that never made it home, the ones that everyone forgot about, and the ones that survived. So,
thank you.
You know, I have my own experiences as well, because
Sure.
you had mentioned something about, you know, being tested for ESP abilities, and there were so many other things, hypnosis being used and stuff. Montauk is turned into the GATE program.
Right.
And that was launched nationwide. Well, I guess it didn't really turn into it. It kind of merged with another program, but nonetheless, that's what the GATE program is. They just moved these programs into the schools because that's where the kids are. You know, they have easy access to all the kids.
Yeah. And thank you for saying that. And I do feel very comfortable talking to you. You know, I mean, you set up a real secure place just to be a couple of men hashing it out. And what the
Right.
hell is wrong with that?
Right.
What the hell is wrong with that? You
Right.
know, forgive me for being provincial, you know, but I think that's a really important thing to do.
Right.
So with that said, I think you made some really good points. And number one, I think it goes back to the OPSEC thing. You know, it's like you can't have your tribe or your family, you know, talking about this stuff.
Right.
So you're talking about your own experience, and you're a good deal younger than me. I have no way to prove this, but was it started on a micro level, and then the data was collected, and then as the decades rolled on, did it, you know, wash out into the macro level?
Right.
So quite possibly because of my generation, which is Gen X, you know, so I'm like heading towards the end of the Cold War. Was it still on that micro scale where they were creating situations where they were individually testing, individually developing a protocol through hypnotic trance and sexual trauma and pain and threat, and going into like the EST thing where they put somebody in a room and domineering people are just emotionally and verbally terrorizing them. They collected the data and they took enough to where they can move forward and do it on a macro level.
Right. Well, yeah,
I could be wrong, you know.
It was the beta testing.
Yeah.
For this program that they wanted to launch nationwide, and in my opinion, ultimately worldwide.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But they got to start small. You know, they got to test it, make sure it works, fix all the bugs before they, you know, launch it nationwide.
Right. And I don't know if what I said is how they did it, but it's always just a theory, you know.
Right. Well, from my understanding, each individual state was actually responsible for launching their own system. So we probably have 50 different versions of how it was launched nationwide. So at least that's what I've been able to gather from talking to other GATE kids, and you know, the videos I've seen, the documents I've read. So it was really decentralized, which I think is why it's incredibly difficult to even be able to find documents related to it. That, you know, a lot of GATE kids never took like their assignments home. You know, kids will shove assignments in their backpacks, just throw it in their closet, and eventually, you get older and you just like, oh, this is interesting. You look at that. That doesn't really happen. I've seen it a couple of times, but most gate kids never took their stuff home. There's not really a whole lot of leftover, if that makes sense.
Wow.
Other than collective memories of the exact same thing. And, a lot of my generation asking, what the hell is this? Like, why did we put on the same headphones, and why did we drink the same pink fluoride treatment, which who knows what the hell that was. Probably was fluoride, but also mixed with other things. Who knows? So yeah, it does seem like it's continuing. And I guess that's my goal with a lot of what I'm trying to do. And honestly, I feel honored that you came on to be able to share this with not only myself, but anyone who watches this, whether they're watching it now live or they watch it in the replay, whenever that may be. I think it's an incredibly brave thing to do, especially when you're facing the possibility of the cynical skepticism. But I think this is one reason why you and I get along, because it kind of seems like I take that skepticism as like a challenge.
Right.
And it kind of seems like you're the same way. Not going to, have somebody say, oh, I don't believe you. And then you're just an emotional wreck and don't know what to do. You do not seem like that. So, and I'm not either. It's like, okay, well, I might not be able to force you, but I'm going to do everything I can to get others to believe. And I'm going to do it at my pace. So here we are.
Well, thank you. It's an honor for me too. I mean, I really appreciate you giving me a secure place to, come together with somebody in relationship. And I think you do have that kind of personality. As for myself, I don't care what other people's issues are when it comes down to somebody else getting better.
Right.
That's where I have my boundary. I can't worry about some people who have a certain intellectual bent who want to keep arguing this point. They're not putting bread on my table.
And they're also, you false memory people.
Yeah, whomever these people are, and they're not putting bread on your table for what you experience, because you are somebody who lived through this at a certain level. And that anybody who's in my generation prior or even now who have been severely traumatized by this, my point is, I don't care what these people think, because I don't want you to get in the way of somebody trying to get better.
Right.
And just be human and not to live. I know I use this term a lot, but it's real important to not live in that existential isolation.
No, I think that's a perfect way to describe it, though.
Yeah, I'm not here trying to be some, not myself. I'm not a crusader. That's not my gig. I'm just thinking about people who were left alone, who were broken, who feel like nobody understands them, and they wake up feeling completely insane because they're having these emotions that they can't figure out why, and memories that don't even feel like they're their own.
Right.
How many homeless people are like that? How many prisoners? How many housewives? How many dudes just trying to get through the day that have had this happen to them, that just need some level of understanding to help them get a foundation just to live life.
Right.
That's it. I guess it's not real exciting, but that's just where I'm at.
Right. No, and I actually do think it is exciting. So maybe some people would disagree, but hey, whatever. So we'll wrap up on this, but for those people that you were just mentioning, or anyone that I guess is suffering to any of this, to whatever degree that they are, from your personal experience, what would you recommend? What kind of advice would you give somebody who thinks that they're going through something like this, or, you know, even if they are sure, what would you recommend?
I would recommend to be very careful and to just give yourself some time. And I don't know if I can list all the different things that would happen or symptoms or whatever you want to call it.
Right.
But if you're having that, those events of like severe emotions and you can't understand why, or you're having memories that you just are so incredulous about, and I would, hopefully you might have somebody in your life that you can talk to, as they always say. If you feel like you could be dissociative, or you are having memories of abuse that you're struggling with, unfortunately, you will have to do a little bit of research to find somebody who you can talk to when it comes to counselors, but
Right.
it's worth it. There are counselors out there that may not completely buy into everything about government programs, and that's okay, because a lot of them don't really care about finding a lot of evidence. They just care about what's happening to you and
Right.
how you can heal those emotions, heal those cognitive issues.
Right.
It doesn't matter what they believe in their eyes. It's about how are you going to get better.
Well
I
put.
hope I'm not being too vague, but there's so much that goes into it. I want to respect the person's situation.
Right.
And there's a lot of people, I think, that are much more understanding about it now. I've talked to younger people where I don't have to go through like a big list of this happened and that happened. They're just like, just tell me the
Right.
story, you know. There's different clergy, there's different Christian groups, there's different religious groups that understand this stuff.
Right.
Don't tell a lot of people. You know, find your little circle and keep it. I'm not saying start a secret society. I'm saying just keep your shit private.
Right.
Keep your shit private and try to suss out some people that could help you. Be careful of doing it online. And I'm not just talking about your own OPSEC. I'm talking about, there's a lot of people that are very emotionally dysregulated. They're very upset. They could be trying to discredit you. And to sit around and argue online all day is a horrible thing.
Right.
And I've said that's one thing that I get kind of jacked up about. Like, don't go on these Twitter spaces and talk about your abuse all day, because people are just going to argue with you. They're going to find something to be upset about because they got upset about something that happened in their past, and you're at each other's throats all day on Twitter.
Right.
That is like, I have a real problem with that. So I want to add that caveat. It might be personal, but I just don't think that's going to help people much.
No, I think you are right on that. Like you mentioned before, people need people. And so people do need a community, but for anything that exists, it can also be corrupted.
Sure.
And it can be inverted. And, you know, I do think it's worth noting that there are organizations, well organized organizations, and typically well-funded organizations that disagree with the stance of DID existing,
sure,
or any form thereof, even though it is officially recognized by the DSM.
I know.
And their whole belief in false memory is absolutely made up. But besides that point, they believe in it so much that they do anything they can to discredit people who are actually suffering.
Yeah, that's true.
And so I do think it is important to point out, you know, there are people out there that have negative intentions
Oh,
to make sure
absolutely.
you never get better, and to make you look crazy and make them, look like the victor.
Right. I
So,
agree 100%.
not everyone is a friend.
That's right.
So yeah, I think that is great advice. And I think that just kind of goes for everyone, right? Especially
Sure.
if you're trying to do anything, because for some reason, they're like, say if you're just average Joe Blow and you're trying to level up your life, there's going to be people around you or that get attracted to you with the only intent of trying to tear you down so you don't level up.
Right.
I don't know why it happens, but those people exist.
Yeah. And
So,
yeah, I agree. And there's only so much you can do about it.
right.
So I guess I don't want this to be anticlimactic to what I'm saying. I wouldn't say this is something I've learned through experience is like, I'm not here to crusade and butt heads. I'm
Right.
here to go diagonal.
Right.
It's like,
Straight up juke them.
it's like, that's what I've had to learn is like, just go diagonal. Like, okay, they're making all this noise and they're doing their thing and trying to impede your progress of just being more human, go diagonal.
Right.
And, maybe find some things that people aren't paying attention to, like sitting down with a friend who's willing to listen and grab a cup of coffee and they got some good capacity to accept some people's emotions, and they may not understand everything you're talking about, but they feel for you and they just want to hang with you and help you get through it.
Right.
I know that kind of sounds a little too simple and anticlimactic, but it really helps. It
Well,
helps you be more human.
simplicity is key, though.
Yeah.
I mean, because as humans, we do tend to overcomplicate things, and it gets messy. So,
Yeah.
anytime I have the chance of doing something simple, I'm gonna do it. You know.
Right.
So I guess my last question, and we'll wrap it up after this. But to put a pretty bow on this, what message is it that you want people to take away from this conversation?
No, I don't know if it's going to be a pretty bow because it's such an ugly subject, but the message that I would like people to take away is these programs were developed for whatever reason, and I don't have any evidence of this being their intention, but go look up the word dehumanization and demoralization and think about what that does to people, how it makes them behave. And then say to yourself, if I love my kids, if I love my brother and my family and my friends, do I want that to happen to somebody? And again,
Right.
it doesn't even just count for people who are trauma-based mind controlled. And
Right.
that's good because then I can take my experience as somebody like that and relate to somebody else who's had a horrible experience. And guess what? Now I'm more human. And that's all I ever wanted. Because I would give anything to undo the damage that was done to my family. I don't care about the mistakes they made. I don't care about the bad choices that they made. I mean, I got hurt really bad, and my family got hurt because they made really poor choices. And I missed them. I missed them all. And we were a family. And I need to feel that emotion so I can respect it. And guess what? I'm sitting here talking to somebody about it and making sense of it. I can't ask for anything better. And that's the truth.
Well, I think that's a absolutely perfect way to end this. So,
Thank you.
of course, and thank you on behalf of myself and everyone watching this now or that ends up watching it in the future. Thank you for coming on and opening up this way. I know, regardless of what the subject is, it's not always the easiest thing to do. So thank you for that. It means a lot. So
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. And you were always welcome on this platform. That's what I'm building it for. Because I think you made a really good point. A lot of these programs, even if it's, a small cult, even if it's just a really just an individual sinister person that likes to abuse people, it doesn't really matter. The whole point is to dehumanize,
Right.
demoralize, make us less human and more animalistic.
Yeah.
And so anything we can do to fight back against that, to reverse it, I'm all for it. I am all for it.
Yeah.
So,
well, thank you for having me and standing by me on it and giving me a secure place to talk about this stuff. I'd be very happy to come back and get into this more with you. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. I'm sure, the audience will leave some, questions in the comment section or whatever. So as time moves on, we can gather some of those up and come back for a part 2 for a Q&A session or something.
That'd be great.
Do something fun. So, but on that note, we're going to get out of here. But before you do, go ahead and do me a favor. Hit that like, share, subscribe, because our big tech overlords have made it so my channel doesn't grow without your help. So everyone watching this, that's the easiest way to help my platform grow, and it's free. So that's the best way you can help out. It actually is so much more important to get those likes, shares, the comments. Like it's hard to quantify exactly how far that goes and how important it is. It's great to get donations, which if you want to help out, there's all sorts of places that you can go to. I've got everything gathered in one convenient link, which will be in the episode description. All of my social medias, all the ways that you can donate. There's even audio platforms, contact information, all sorts of fun stuff. You can also head on over to risetoliberty.store and go check out some of the merch I have, long sleeve, t-shirts, hoodies, bottles, coffee mugs, all of these things. The reason I'm, bringing this up is because this platform, this show, everything that I do is 100% viewer and listener funded. I don't take money from pretty much anyone other than the viewers and listeners. So this is your show as much as it is mine. So if you are able to, please go pick up a t-shirt. If you aren't, I understand times are tough. Then by all means, just hit the like, share, subscribe. Email this episode to somebody that you might think will get something out of it. Spread it around. That's how this grows. That's how we make it more difficult for the people that want to do harm to not only individuals, but society as a whole, is by having these conversations, because it makes it more difficult for them to hide. And really, that's the whole point. So on that note, Anonymous Italian, thank you once again. And everyone else, until next time, stay free, my friends.